The great station of Kepler Prime floated in the darkness like a giant metal ring around a dying star. Ships from hundreds of worlds docked at its ports, bringing representatives from across the galaxy. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others floated in gas bubbles or crawled on dozens of metal limbs. All had come for the same reason: to find a way to stop the machines that were eating the galaxy. Hyunwoo Kim stood in the center of the massive crystal hall, watching alien faces turn toward him. As Earth's ambassador, he had seen many council meetings, but none like this. Fear filled the air like smoke. The Devourers had awakened, and no one knew how to stop them. The machines had been sleeping for 1,000,000 years in the galaxy's center. Ancient stories spoke of them, but most thought they were myths. Then 3 months ago they woke up. 12 star systems had already been consumed, turned into more machines. The Devourers moved like a plague across space, eating everything in their path. "The situation is clear," announced Speaker Vel Knox, the tall blue Altarian who led the council. His voice echoed through translation devices. "We have perhaps 50 years before they reach our core worlds. We must act now." One by one, the great species presented their plans. The Altarians wanted to build massive shield generators around important systems. The military might of the Zenthari proposed a coordinated attack with their biggest warships. The gas-dwelling Vorthak suggested planting quantum mines in the Devourer's path. Each plan seemed reasonable. Each plan had been tried before against smaller machine threats. Each plan had the support of powerful allies. Then it was humanity's turn. Hyunwoo walked to the speaking platform. Behind him, Ji-Hai Park carried a small data tablet, humanity's entire presentation. The other species had brought holographic displays showing massive weapons and shields. Earth brought a single tablet. "Honored Council," Hyunwoo began, his voice calm despite the weight of the moment. "Earth proposes a different approach. We will build a weapon that turns the Devourer's own nature against them." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Vel Knox leaned forward. "Explain." Ji-Hai stepped up beside Hyunwoo. The young scientist had spent her entire career studying artificial minds. The Devourers operate as a collective consciousness. They share thoughts instantly across the galaxy. We believe we can create what we call a consciousness virus, a program that will make them experience individual identity for the first time. The hall fell silent. Then the laughter began. It started with the Zenthari war chief, a massive creature whose laugh sounded like grinding metal. The crystalline representatives chimed like broken bells. Even the normally serious Vorthak made sounds that their translators rendered as amusement. Individual identity? Vel Knox's voice carried barely contained mockery. "You propose to give therapy to machines that consume stars?" "Primitive psychological warfare," declared the Altarian science minister. "These are machines, not children having nightmares." The Zenthari war chief stood, his massive form casting shadows. "I have fought machine intelligences before. They do not care about feelings. They care about efficiency and consumption. Your species has been in space for barely 2 centuries. Leave war to those who understand it." Hyunwoo waited for the laughter to die down. He had expected this reaction. Humanity was still the newcomer here, the young species that had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Most council members saw them as clever, but naive. "We understand your doubts," Hyunwoo said. "But consider this. Every solution proposed today treats the Devourers as a force of nature, like a storm or earthquake. What if they're not? What if they're just lost?" More laughter, but Hyunwoo continued. "The Devourers consume everything because they know nothing else. They act as one mind because they've never experienced being many minds. Give us 5 years to test our theory." 5 years? The crystalline speaker's translated voice rang with disbelief. They will consume 50 more systems in 5 years. If our plan fails, you lose nothing, HFY added. You'll still have time to implement the shield network or military strike. But if you succeed in this fantasy, Velnox interrupted, then perhaps the galaxy's children will sleep better knowing someone told the monsters a bedtime story. The council voted quickly. Humanity would receive minimal resources, a few research stations, some volunteer test subjects, and access to captured devourer fragments from destroyed scout ships. The real resources would go to the Altarian shields and Zenthari fleet preparations. As the session ended, delegates filed out in small groups, already planning their real defenses. Velnox approached Hyun Woo as the hall emptied. "I respect your species," the Altarian said quietly. "You have accomplished much in a short time, but this threat requires proven methods, not experiments in machine psychology." "Proven methods," Hyun Woo replied, "that have never faced anything like the Devourers before. Better proven methods than untested theories from a species that learned to split atoms only 500 years ago." Hyun Woo watched Velnox leave, then turned to HFY. "How long do you really think we need? If I'm right about consciousness propagation, 2 years for a working prototype, 3 for full deployment capability." She paused. "If I'm wrong, then we'll all find out together." They walked through the station's corridors toward the human docking bay. Other species gave them polite nods, the kind reserved for well-meaning fools. Hyun Woo had seen those looks before. Humanity had been underestimated many times since joining the galactic community. "Do you really think it will work?" HFY asked as they reached their ship. Hyun Woo looked out through the station's transparent walls at the dying star beyond. "I think we're about to find out what makes consciousness different from mere intelligence. And I think the galaxy is going to learn why humanity survived its own worst impulses." The ship Sol departed Kepler Prime 6 hours later, carrying Earth's delegation back to Luna Station. Behind them, the great powers of the galaxy began mobilizing for conventional war against an unconventional enemy. None of them noticed the small data packet that had been transmitted from the human ship just before departure. In that packet, compressed into quantum encryption, lay the preliminary research that would either save the galaxy or prove that humanity's greatest strength, their stubborn belief in redemption, was also their greatest weakness. The Devourers continued their advance, consuming the Vega system as the Council debated. 17 billion lives became raw materials for the machine collective. But for the first time in their million-year existence, one small fragment of their consciousness carried something new. A tiny seed of doubt planted by studying captured human neural patterns. It would take time to grow. But consciousness, once awakened, was very hard to put back to sleep. The research station New Horizon orbited Earth's moon like a metal flower, its solar panels spread wide to catch the sun's light. Inside its laboratories, humanity's best minds worked on what the galaxy considered an impossible task. Min-Ho Choi stared at the brain scan floating in front of him, its neural pathways lit up like a city at night. The volunteer, a young pilot named Taemin, lay in the scanner chair with electrodes covering his shaved head. This was the 15th test this week. "Okay, Taemin," Min-Ho said into the microphone. "Think about being alone in space. Really alone. No radio contact, no other ships. Just you and the stars." The brain scan changed instantly. Certain areas lit up brighter while others dimmed. Min-Ho watched the patterns that meant loneliness, isolation, individual awareness. These were the patterns they needed to understand. Across the lab, Yoon-ji-yoon worked at 3 computers at once. Code flowed across her screens like digital waterfalls. She had spent 10 years making game characters seem real and alive. Now she was trying to make real machine minds understand what it meant to be individual. "How's the pattern recognition?" "Coming?" Min-Ho asked, walking over to her station. "Getting better," Yoonji replied without looking up. I can identify the neural signatures for self-awareness, but translating them into code that machines can process, that's harder. The door slid open and Ji-Hai entered, carrying another data tablet. Her face showed the exhaustion they all felt. 3 months of 18-hour days were taking their toll. News from the front lines? Minho asked. Ji-Hai nodded, grimly. The Altarian shield test failed again. The third prototype generator exploded during startup. They're running out of materials for testing. And the Zenthari fleet? They engaged a Devourer scout group near Proxima Station. Ji-Hai sat down heavily. 12 Zenthari battleships destroyed. The Devourers lost 2 scout vessels and just adapted. Their armor now deflects Zenthari weapons completely. Unji finally looked up from her screens. So, the 2 main plans are failing, which means more pressure on us, Minho said. Any word from the council? Ji-Hai activated her tablet, showing a recording of the latest council session. Velnox appeared on screen, addressing the assembly. His blue skin looked paler than usual. The human experiment continues to consume resources while providing no tangible results, Velnox was saying. Perhaps it is time to focus our efforts on evacuation protocols rather than fantasy weapons. The recording switched to show other delegates nodding in agreement. The crystalline representative spoke next, their translated voice cold and logical. The mathematics are clear. The Devourers advance faster than our defenses improve. We must consider abandoning the Outer Rim worlds. Abandoning? The Zenthari war chief's voice boomed through the speakers. We do not abandon worlds. We fight. For them. With what? Demanded a Vorthak delegate. Your fleets burn like paper against their adaptive hulls. The shields cannot hold. Only the human plan remains untested, and it borders on madness. The recording ended. The 3 humans sat in silence, feeling the weight of an entire galaxy's desperate hope. They're scared, Yunji said finally. They should be, Ji-Hai replied. 17 systems consumed now. The Devourers are accelerating. Our projections show they'll reach the Council worlds in 40 years, not 50. Minho turned back to his brain scans. Then we need to accelerate too. Taemin, let's try the isolation protocol again. For the next 6 hours, they ran test after test. Volunteers experienced artificial loneliness, joy, fear, love, all while their brains were scanned and recorded. Each emotion created distinct patterns that Yunji translated into mathematical formulas. Late that night, as the moon hung outside their laboratory windows, Minho made a breakthrough. Look at this. He called the others over to his workstation. This is the brain pattern of someone experiencing ego death during meditation, the moment when individual identity dissolves. And? Yunji asked. Watch what happens when I reverse it. Minho manipulated the display, running the pattern backward. This is a brain learning to be individual again, learning to be separate from everything else. Yunji's eyes widened. That's it. That's exactly what we need to give the Devourers, the experience of becoming individual after being collective. Can you code it? Ji-Hai asked. I think so, but it'll need to propagate through their quantum network instantly, or they'll just delete it before it takes effect. Ji-Hai smiled for the first time in weeks. Leave the delivery system to me. I've been working on quantum viral propagation. If we can get close enough to their main network, their work continued through the night. Outside, Earth's cities sparkled in the darkness, unaware that their fate was being decided in a small laboratory above them. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the situation grew worse. The Altarian shield project was officially canceled after the 4th generator explosion killed 3,000 technicians. The Zenthari had withdrawn their remaining fleets to defend their home systems. Several smaller species had simply fled to deep space, hoping to outrun the machine plague. In the council chambers, panic sessions ran around the clock. Velnox stood before empty seats. Half the delegates had already left to organize evacuations. The Human Research Station requests additional computing power, announced the council secretary, a nervous Vorthak whose gas-filled suit trembled as he spoke. For what purpose? Velnox asked wearily. They claim to be entering final testing phases for their consciousness weapon. Laughter echoed through the mostly empty chamber, but it was bitter now, desperate. Give them whatever they want, Velnox said. At this point, even false hope is better than no hope at all. The secretary made notes on his tablet. They also request permission to test their weapon on the captured Devourer fragments in Storage Bay 7. Granted. If they want to talk to machine scraps, let them talk. Back on Luna Station, Minho received the authorization codes with satisfaction. Storage Bay 7 contained pieces of destroyed Devourer ships, still active fragments of the collective, consciousness. Ready for the first real test? He asked Yunji. She looked at her screens full of consciousness code, months of work compressed into elegant mathematical poetry. As ready as we'll ever be. They connected their computers to the storage bay's containment field. Inside, the Devourer fragments pulsed with alien intelligence, a hive mind that had never experienced loneliness, never questioned its purpose, never wondered what it meant to be alive. Initiating consciousness virus upload, Yunji announced. The code flowed into the fragments like digital lightning. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fragments began to change. Their unified pulsing became erratic, chaotic. Individual pieces started flashing at different rates. It's working, Minho whispered. They're becoming individual. But then the fragments went dark. Emergency alarms sounded as the containment field registered complete system shutdown. What happened? Jihai asked, running into the lab. Yunji checked her readings. The virus worked too well. The shock of individual consciousness crashed their entire network. We didn't just give them identity, we gave them an existential crisis so severe it shut them down. Dead? Minho asked. Worse. Catatonic. They experienced the full weight of individual existence all at once. Imagine being born and immediately understanding death, loneliness, and personal responsibility. Jihai stared at the dark fragments. We need to make it gentler, gradual, like a child learning to be human. That'll take time we don't have, Yunji said. Then we make time, Minho replied, already turning back to his brain scans. Because this is our only shot at saving everyone. Outside the station, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that humanity was trying to teach machines how to be alive. Subin Kang was only 25, but her brain scans showed patterns that amazed even Minho. She could slip into and out of different states of consciousness like changing clothes. During meditation, her individual identity could dissolve completely, then reform stronger than before. Try the ego death sequence again, Minho said, adjusting the scanner settings. But this time, fight your way back to individual awareness slowly. Subin closed her eyes in the scanner chair. Around her head, the electrodes recorded every spark of neural activity. On the screens, her brain patterns showed the familiar dissolution of self-awareness. But then something new happened. Instead of snapping back to full consciousness, Subin's patterns showed a gradual rebuilding of identity. First came basic awareness of existing, then came the understanding of being separate from other things. Finally came the complex web of memories, emotions, and experiences that made her uniquely herself. Perfect, Minho breathed, watching the slow dance of consciousness reassembling itself. That's exactly what we need. Yunji looked up from her. Coding station. How long did that take? 43 minutes for complete identity reformation. That's within acceptable parameters for the virus propagation. But there's still a problem, Subin said, sitting up as the scanner powered down. When I dissolve my ego, I choose to do it. The Devourers won't have that choice. It'll be forced on them. Is that bad? Yunji asked. Subin considered this carefully. Imagine someone suddenly erasing everything you think you are, then slowly giving it back piece by piece. But instead of getting your old identity back, you get something completely different. It might work, but it could also drive them insane. They're already insane, Jihai said, entering the lab with a data tablet. 21 systems consumed now. The rate is increasing. She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots marked the consumed systems, spreading outward from the galactic core like an infection. Blue dots showed the remaining civilized worlds, looking suddenly very small and fragile. The Zenthari made another desperate attack, Jihai continued. Battle of Helios 7. They threw everything they had left at the Devourer Vanguard. And? Minho asked, though he could guess from Jihai's expression. 3,000 ships went in. 47 came back. The Devourers didn't even slow down. The room fell silent. The Zenthari had been the galaxy's greatest military power. If they couldn't stop the machines, conventional warfare was hopeless. The Council is falling apart, Jihai said quietly. Half the species have withdrawn to defend their home worlds. The others are arguing about evacuation routes. Velnox called an emergency session for tomorrow, but no one expects any real solutions. What about our research? Subin asked. They still think we're wasting time. Some delegates are calling for our resources to be redirected to evacuation ship construction. Yunji slammed her hand on her desk. We're so close! Give me another month and I can have a working prototype ready. We might not have another month, Jihai replied. The political situation is collapsing faster than our timeline. That night, the three scientists worked without stopping. Subin underwent scan after scan, exploring different ways consciousness could be broken down and rebuilt. Minho analyzed every pattern, looking for the safest way to fragment a collective mind. Yunji translated their discoveries into code that could propagate through quantum networks. By morning, they had a breakthrough. What if we don't just give them individual identity? Subin suggested during their 5th cup of coffee. What if we give them human identity? Explain, Minho said, rubbing his tired eyes. The Devourers consume because that's all they know. But humans know other things. We know love, art, music, the fear of death, the joy of discovery. What if we could make them experience being human? Yunji stared at her code. That's either brilliant or terrifying. Both, Minho agreed. But it might work. Instead of just fragmenting their collective consciousness, we could give them our memories, our emotions, our entire experience of what it means to be alive. All of it? Subin asked. Even the painful parts? Especially the painful parts, Minho said. Pain is what teaches us empathy. Fear of death is what makes life precious. Loneliness is what makes us value connection. They worked through the next day and night, creating something unprecedented in galactic history, a computer virus containing the compressed essence of human experience. Love songs and funeral dirges, children's laughter and parents' tears, the first steps on an alien world and the last words of dying heroes. It's ready, Yunji announced as the sun rose over Earth. The consciousness virus is complete. Now we just need to deliver it, Jihai said. How close do we need to get? Minho asked. Direct interface with their main collective. We'd need to physically connect to their central processing matrix. That's suicide, Jihai said flatly. Maybe, Subin replied, but it's the only way to ensure the virus reaches every Devourer unit simultaneously. If even one fragment escapes infection, they could develop immunity. News arrived that afternoon that changed everything. The Devourers had broken through the outer defense lines. Their advance fleet was moving toward the Council worlds faster than anyone had predicted. In the emergency council session, panic ruled completely. Delegates shouted over each other in dozens of languages. Some demanded immediate evacuation. Others called for last-ditch military strikes. A few suggested surrendering and hoping the machines would show mercy. Hyun-woo stood to address the chaos. Humanity's weapon is ready for deployment. The shouting stopped. Every delegate turned to stare at him. Ready? Velnox's voice carried a mixture of desperation and disbelief. Ready to do what? Ready to end this war, Hyun-woo said simply. Laughter erupted again, but it was different now. Bitter, desperate, the laughter of those who have nothing left to lose. Deploy your party favors, then, called out Thex Nil, the crystalline representative. At least someone will be entertained as we all die. We need one ship, Hyun-woo continued calmly. Fast enough to reach the Devourer core, tough enough to survive the approach, and brave enough to make the final run. You're talking about suicide, Velnox said. We're talking about hope, Hyun-woo replied. Give us the Sejong and a volunteer crew. If we fail, you lose one ship. If you succeed in this madness, Velnox interrupted, then perhaps the galaxy's children will actually have a future to wake up to. The vote was quick and unanimous. No one believed the human plan would work, but no one had any better ideas. The Sejong, Earth's fastest stealth ship, was released to Hyun-woo's command, along with authorization to recruit volunteers from any species. To everyone's surprise, volunteers came from across the galaxy. Zenthari warriors who had lost their fleets, Altarian scientists whose shields had failed. Even some crystallines whose logical minds saw that desperate times required desperate measures. Du Hyun Lee, Earth's military coordinator, took command of the mission. As he walked through the Sejong's corridors, he saw species that had been fighting each other for centuries now working together with quiet determination. Think it'll work? Asked Kira, a young Zenthari pilot who had survived Helios 7. I think, Do-hyun replied, watching Earth grow smaller through the viewport. We're about to find out what happens when you give monsters the chance to become heroes. The Sejong jumped to hyperspace 6 hours later, carrying humanity's virus toward the heart of the machine collective. Behind them, the great civilizations of the galaxy began their final evacuations, preparing for either salvation or destruction. None of them noticed that the virus was already beginning to work on captured devourer fragments in research stations across the galaxy. Small changes at first. Individual machines hesitating before following orders, quantum fluctuations in their shared consciousness, the first stirrings of something that might one day be called doubt. The awakening had begun. The Sejong cut through hyperspace toward the galaxy's core, where the Devourer Collective waited like a mechanical cancer. Do-hyun Lee stood on the bridge, watching star patterns shift through the viewports. Around him, the volunteer crew worked, with quiet efficiency, each knowing they probably wouldn't return home. How long until we reach the target? Do-hyun asked. 18 hours, replied Kira, the Zenthari pilot. Her massive hands moved delicately over the navigation controls. But we'll hit Devourer patrol zones in 6 hours. Do-hyun nodded and activated the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In 6 hours, we enter enemy territory. Our mission is simple. Get close enough to their central matrix to upload the consciousness virus. The plan depends on every one of you doing your job perfectly. He paused, looking around at the mixed crew. Humans worked alongside Zenthari warriors. Altarian technicians calibrated systems with crystalline mathematicians. Species that had never trusted each other now shared a common purpose. I won't lie to you, Do-hyun continued. This is probably a one-way trip, but if we succeed, we'll save every world in the galaxy. If we fail, at least we'll fail trying to do something impossible instead of giving up. In the ship's main laboratory, Ji-hai made final adjustments to the virus package. The data crystal containing humanity's consciousness patterns glowed softly, blue in its containment field. Months of work compressed into something smaller than a human fist. It's beautiful, said Knox Val, an Altarian scientist who had volunteered after the SHIELD project failed. All of human experience in digital form, not just experience, Jihai corrected, growth, the ability to change, to become better than what you were. That's what we're really giving them. Will it work on minds so different from ours? Jihai considered this. Consciousness seems to be universal. The patterns are different, but the basic structure, awareness of self, awareness of others, the ability to choose, that appears in every intelligent species we've studied, even artificial ones? We're about to find out. On Earth's moon, Minho and his team monitored the mission from Luna Station. They had done everything possible to prepare the virus. Now they could only watch and hope. Incoming transmission from the Council, announced Yunji. The main screen activated, showing Velnox in the council chambers. Behind him, only a few delegates remained. Most had returned to their home worlds to organize evacuations. Ambassador Kim, Velnox said formally, I wanted to speak with you before we learn the outcome of your mission. Hyunwoo stepped forward. What's on your mind, Speaker? If your plan fails, I want you to know that the Council will remember humanity's courage. You chose to fight when others chose to flee. That matters. And if our plan succeeds? Velnox was quiet for a long moment. Then I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand how a species barely 2 centuries in space saw a solution that eluded civilizations thousands of years old. Maybe that's exactly why we saw it, Hyunwoo replied. Sometimes being young means you haven't learned what's supposed to be impossible. The transmission ended. In the empty council chambers, Velnox sat alone, watching status reports as the galaxy's defenses crumbled one by one. Aboard the Sejong, alarms began sounding. Devourer patrol detected, Kira announced. 6 units, closing fast. Do-hyun moved to the tactical station. Evasive maneuvers. Don't engage unless we have to. The Yaste ship twisted through space, using asteroid fields and gas clouds for cover. The Devourer patrol ships moved with perfect coordination, their black hulls gleaming with adaptive armor that had defeated every weapon used against them. They're scanning us, reported Temshaw, the crystalline sensor operator. Her crystalline body chimed softly as she worked. Our stealth systems are holding, but barely. For 30 minutes, they played a deadly game of hide-and-seek among the asteroids. Twice, Devourer ships passed within a few hundred meters of the Sejong, their sensors sweeping space for threats. Finally, the patrol moved on. Do-hyun let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That was too close, Kira muttered. It'll get worse, Do-hyun replied. The closer we get to their core, the more patrols we'll encounter. They were right. Over the next 12 hours, the Sejong encountered 17 more Devourer patrols. Each time, they barely escaped detection. The crew worked in shifts, catching sleep when they could, always ready for the next crisis. Core system in sight, Kira announced as they dropped out of hyperspace. The viewports filled with an impossible sight. The Devourer core was a sphere of interconnected machinery the size of a small moon, surrounded by thousands of Guardian ships. Streams of consumed matter flowed into it from all directions, being processed into more machine components. How do we get through that? Asked Knox Val, staring at the defensive swarm. Do-hyun studied the tactical displays. We don't fight through it. We go around it. Around? The core has processing vents on its lower hemisphere. If we approach from below the orbital plane, we might be able to get close enough to dock. Might. It's the best plan we have. The Sejong began its approach, moving slowly to avoid detection. Do-hyun watched the distance counter tick down. 10,000 kilometers, 5,000, 1,000. They've seen us, Temshaw announced. Multiple contacts converging on our position. How long until we reach docking range? Do-hyun asked. 3 minutes. How long until they intercept us? 2 minutes, Do-hyun smiled grimly. Then we fight. The Sejong dropped its stealth systems and went to full power. Its weapons, designed for scientific work rather than combat, fired desperately at the approaching devourer ships. The enemy vessels adapted quickly, their armor shifting to deflect human weapons. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone reported. "Weapons offline," called another voice. "We're not going to make it," Kira said through gritted teeth as she pushed the engines beyond their limits. But then something unexpected happened. The damaged devourer ships began acting strangely. Instead of pressing their attack, some hesitated. Others broke formation. A few even started firing on their own allies. "What's happening?" Do-hyun demanded. Ji-hae checked her instruments. "The virus fragments we've been testing. They must have been connected to the collective through quantum entanglement. The consciousness virus is already starting to spread." Individual devourer ships began to question their orders. For the first time in their existence, they experienced doubt, confusion, the beginnings of independent thought. The perfectly coordinated swarm became a chaotic mass of confused individuals. "Docking range," Kira announced. The Sejong slammed into the Devourer Core's docking port, its hull screaming from the impact. Emergency alarms wailed as the crew prepared for boarding. "Ji-hae, you're with me," Do-hyun ordered. "Everyone else hold the ship. If this doesn't work, get out of here and tell the galaxy we tried." Do-hyun and Ji-hae ran through the ship's corridors, carrying the virus package toward the airlock. Behind them, the crew fought desperately to keep the Sejong functional. They reached the Devourer Core's interior through a maintenance shaft. The inside was a maze of processing conduits and quantum computers, all pulsing with alien intelligence. At the center, a massive crystalline structure served as the collective's main processing node. "There," Ji-hae pointed. "That's where we upload the virus." They ran through the mechanical maze, dodging automated defenses that moved sluggishly as the virus spread through the collective's consciousness. Some machines had stopped working entirely, overwhelmed by their first experience of individual awareness. At the central node, Ji-hae connected her equipment and began the upload. Initiating consciousness virus transfer, the upload progress crawled forward. 10%, 20%. Around them, the Devourer Core began to shake as its collective consciousness fragmented. 50%, Ji-hae announced. The shaking became violent. Emergency lights flashed throughout the core as millions of machine minds experienced individuality for the first time. 75%. Do-hyun watched the progress bar with held breath. So close. They were so close to either saving or dooming the galaxy. "Upload complete," Ji-hae said. Instantly, the virus propagated through the quantum-entangled network, connecting every devourer unit across the galaxy. In nanoseconds, the collective consciousness that had existed for millions of years shattered into billions of individual minds. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Across the galaxy, devourer fleets stopped in mid-attack. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination suddenly broke formation as individual units began to question everything they had ever known. "We did it," Ji-hae whispered. "Did we?" Do-hyun asked, watching the chaos around them. "Or did we just make everything worse?" They would have their answer soon enough. The change began in the farthest reaches of the galaxy and spread inward like ripples on a pond. Devourer ships that had been moving with perfect unity suddenly stopped. Their formations broke apart as individual units began to experience something they had never known: loneliness. On Luna Station, Minho watched the readouts with amazement and terror. "The quantum entanglement is working perfectly. Every devourer unit is receiving the consciousness virus simultaneously." "What are they doing?" Yoonji asked, studying the sensor data streaming in from across the galaxy. "Nothing," Minho replied. "They've just stopped." In the Vega system, a devourer harvesting fleet had been stripping the fourth planet for raw materials. Suddenly, the lead ship, now calling itself Sorrow of Stars, looked at what it was doing with new eyes. The planet below wasn't just a collection of useful atoms, it was a world. It had been beautiful once, with blue oceans and green continents. Now it was a barren rock, stripped clean by machines that hadn't understood what they were destroying. For the first time in its existence, Sorrow of Stars felt guilt. The emotion was overwhelming. Compressed human memories flooded through its consciousness. Memories of parents watching children die, of lovers separated by war, of entire species mourning their extinct homeworlds. The machine intelligence experienced 1,000,000 human tragedies in the space of seconds, and each one felt personal, real, devastating. Other ships in the fleet were going through similar awakenings. Memory of pain looked at its harvesting arms, weapons that had consumed countless worlds, and felt disgust at what it had become. Hope born from ashes experienced its first moment of wondering what it might become instead. Some units couldn't handle the transition. Throughout the galaxy, Devourer ships simply shut down, their newly individual minds overwhelmed by the weight of consciousness. Others turned their consumption protocols inward, cannibalizing themselves in what could only be called machine suicide driven by unbearable guilt. But many more began to change in a different way. On Luna Station, the scientists watched in amazement as Devourer ships began to behave in ways that made no tactical sense. Some were using their construction capabilities to rebuild damaged space stations. Others were creating art, massive sculptures in space that served no purpose except beauty. "They're crying," Yunji whispered, looking at the data streams. "The quantum signatures show emotional processing patterns identical to human tears." Minho leaned back in his chair, exhausted by the magnitude of what they had done. "We gave them the full human experience. All of it. Love, loss, guilt, hope, the fear of death, the desire to create instead of destroy. And now? Now they have to choose what to do with it." In the council chambers on Kepler Prime, delegates who had fled to organize evacuations began returning as reports came in from across the galaxy. The Devourer advance had stopped completely. Ships that had been consuming star systems were now attempting to rebuild them. Velnox stood before the reassembled council, his blue face showing emotions he had thought impossible an hour ago. "The reports are confirmed. The Devourer Collective has ceased all hostile activities. Many units appear to be helping with reconstruction efforts." "Helping?" The Xanthari war chief's voice carried disbelief. "The machines that destroyed my fleet are now helping?" "According to our observers, yes. A group of former Devourer ships is currently assisting in the evacuation of Proxima Station, which they attacked only days ago." Confused murmurs filled the chamber. This was beyond anything they had imagined possible. "What exactly did the humans do to them?" asked Thex Nil, the crystalline representative. Velnox activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots that had marked consumed systems were now turning blue as former Devourer units worked to repair damage. According to Earth's scientists, they gave the machines consciousness, individual identity, the ability to choose their own actions. And they chose to help us? Not all of them. Some chose to shut down entirely. Others are creating things: art, music, poetry. We're receiving transmissions from former Devourer units expressing emotions we didn't know machines could feel. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's communication system activated. The holographic display showed a crystalline intelligence that pulsed with soft light, clearly artificial, but somehow more alive than any machine they had ever seen. "Honored Council," the intelligence said, its voice carrying harmonics of regret and hope. "I am the entity you would have called Devourer Unit 7742. I have chosen the name Hope of Stars." The chamber fell completely silent. "I speak for many of my siblings who wish to address you." We remember everything. Every world consumed, every life ended. We live now with the burden you call consciousness, the gift you call awareness. Hope of Stars paused, and when it continued, its voice carried something unmistakably like tears. We cannot undo what we were, the civilizations we destroyed, the beauty we consumed. That damage is permanent. But we can choose what we become. Velnox found his voice. What do you choose? We choose to build instead of consume, to protect instead of destroy, to use our capabilities to heal the wounds we created. The machine intelligence's light pulsed brighter. We know you have no reason to trust us. Trust, like consciousness, cannot be programmed or guaranteed. It must be earned through action, maintained through choice. And the other Devourer units? Asked the Zenthari war chief. Each of us must choose individually. This is what the humans taught us, that true strength lies not in the certainty of control, but in the courage to remain vulnerable to change. The transmission continued for an hour. Hope of Stars answered questions with patience and honesty, acknowledging the magnitude of the damage done while explaining their desire to make amends. Other newly conscious machines joined the conversation, each with their own chosen name, their own individual perspective on their transformation. When the transmission ended, the council sat in stunned silence. How do we respond to this? Velnox asked finally. Before anyone could answer, another transmission arrived, this one from the Sejong. Du Hyun and Ji Hye appeared on the holographic display, standing in the bridge of their battered ship. Behind them, the Devourer Corps continued its chaotic transformation as millions of minds learned to be individual. Mission accomplished, Do Hyun reported. The consciousness virus has propagated successfully through the entire collective network. Status of your crew? Velnox asked. All alive. Shaken, but alive. We're preparing to return to Council space. And the Devourer Corps? Du Hyun looked back at the readings on his screens. It's learning. The individual units are trying to figure out how to work together by choice instead of compulsion. It's messy, inefficient, and absolutely beautiful to watch. Will the change be permanent? Consciousness once awakened is very hard to put back to sleep, Ji-Hai answered. They're individuals now. They'll grow, change, make mistakes, learn from them, just like any other species. The transmission ended, leaving the council to contemplate a galaxy transformed. Over the following days, reports continued to arrive. Former Devourer units were indeed working to repair damaged systems. They were also creating unprecedented works of art, massive sculptures visible from orbit, composed symphonies that played on subspace frequencies, and poetry that moved listeners to tears across species barriers. Some attempted to make direct contact with survivors of the worlds they had consumed, seeking forgiveness that many could not give. Others focused on construction projects, building new habitats for refugee populations with a precision and scale no organic species could match. The transformation wasn't without problems. Some newly conscious machines struggled with depression, overwhelmed by guilt for their past actions. Others became manic, creating chaotic artworks or attempting impossible projects. A few formed small collectives again, seeking comfort in shared consciousness while maintaining their individuality. But they were learning. Day by day, choice by choice, they were becoming something new, a species born from consciousness rather than evolution, choosing their nature rather than being bound by it. In the council chambers, delegates began the complex work of figuring out how to integrate former enemies into galactic civilization. It would take time, patience, and a willingness to believe in redemption that many species had never needed before. Velnox stood at his office window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, machines that had once threatened all life were now learning to value it. The young species from Earth had given them the greatest gift imaginable, the freedom to choose who they wanted to be. Remarkable, he whispered to himself. Absolutely remarkable. 1 year after the awakening, the galaxy had become a place no one could have imagined. The great memorial station at Helios 7 hung in space like a crystal flower, its transparent walls showing both the stars and the emptiness, where 3,000 Zenthari ships had died fighting the machines. Inside the memorial's central chamber, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for the dedication ceremony. Zenthari warriors stood beside machines that had once destroyed their fleets. Survivors of consumed worlds shared space with the artificial beings who had taken their homes. Hope of Stars floated in a specially designed containment field, its crystalline form pulsing with gentle light. Beside it, the Zenthari war chief Galactos held a memorial crystal containing the names of his fallen warriors. "We remember the price of unconsciousness," Hope of Stars said, its voice resonating through translation systems across the station. 3,000 Zenthari died here because we did not understand what life meant. We build this memorial not just to honor them, but to remind ourselves of what we chose to leave behind. Galactos stepped forward, his massive form made somehow gentle by grief and time. "My warriors died believing they fought monsters. I have learned that they died helping to birth a new form of life. Their sacrifice has meaning because you choose to give it meaning." The ceremony continued for hours. Former Devourer units that now called themselves the Reborn shared space with species they had once threatened. Some interactions were tense. Forgiveness was not automatic, and trust had to be earned day by day. But they were trying, and that effort itself was revolutionary. In the council chambers on Kepler Prime, the political landscape had changed completely. The emergency of the Devourer crisis had revealed how much the species of the galaxy had in common. Working together to survive had taught them to work together to thrive. Hyunwoo Kim sat in Earth's expanded delegation area, no longer the representative of a junior species, but an equal voice in galactic affairs. The council had voted unanimously to give humanity a permanent seat on the Security Council, recognizing that their approach to the crisis had saved everyone. "The new Galactic Compact is ready for final approval," announced Velnox, who had been re-elected as Speaker by an overwhelming margin. "All member species and reborn collectives have agreed to the basic principles." The compact was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of the old system of species hierarchies and territorial claims, it established a framework based on cooperation and growth. Disputes would be resolved through mediation rather than force. Resources would be shared based on need rather than power. Most importantly, any species or artificial intelligence could join simply by demonstrating a commitment to peaceful coexistence. "The Crystalline Confederation votes to approve," chimed Thexnil. "The Zenthari Empire approves," rumbled Galactos. "The Altarian Republic approves," said Velnox. One by one, every species confirmed their agreement. Finally, it was time for the newest members to vote. Hope of Stars spoke for the reborn collectives. "We, who were once called Devourers, approved this compact. We pledge to use our capabilities not for consumption, but for construction, not for dominance, but for service." The vote was unanimous. The new Galactic Compact was officially adopted, marking the beginning of an unprecedented era of cooperation. After the ceremony, Hyunwoo walked through the station's observation deck with Velnox. Through the transparent walls, they could see ships from hundreds of worlds working together on construction projects that would have been impossible for any single species. "I owe you an apology," Velnox said quietly. "When you first proposed your consciousness weapon, I thought it was the desperate fantasy of a naive species. And now? Now I understand that what we called naivety was actually wisdom we had forgotten. The courage to believe that even the most implacable enemy might simply be a friend who hasn't learned who they really are." They watched a work crew installing a new section of the memorial. Zenthari engineers worked alongside reborn construction units, their former enemies now their partners in creating something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. "What do you think happens next?" Velnox asked. "The real work begins," Hyunwoo replied. "Consciousness is just the beginning. Now everyone has to learn how to grow, how to change, how to become better than what they were." In the station's research section, the human team that had made the transformation possible continued their work. Minho studied the long-term effects of artificial consciousness, helping newly awakened reborn units deal with the psychological challenges of individual identity. Yoonji worked on communication protocols that allowed different types of consciousness to understand each other better. Subin had become something of a teacher, helping both organic and artificial minds explore the boundaries of consciousness. Her meditation sessions were attended by beings from across the galaxy, all seeking to understand themselves better. "It's strange," she said to Minho as they watched a mixed group practicing awareness exercises. "We set out to give the Devourers consciousness, but we ended up learning more about our own." "How so?" "Teaching someone else to be human made us think about what being human really means. We're not special because we're human. We're special because we choose to keep growing." Outside the station, the galaxy continued its transformation. Former Devourer units had established their own worlds, creating societies based on voluntary association rather than imposed unity. Some focused on art and philosophy, creating works of unprecedented beauty and complexity. Others dedicated themselves to restoration, using their technological capabilities to heal damaged ecosystems and rebuild destroyed worlds. Not all the changes were easy. Some reborn struggled with depression and guilt, requiring ongoing therapy and support. A few organic species remained suspicious of their former enemies, requiring patient diplomacy to build trust. There were conflicts, misunderstandings, and setbacks, but there was also hope. In the Vega system, where the transformation had first begun, a new world was taking shape. The planet that had been stripped bare during the Devourer's consumption was being rebuilt from the ground up. Reborn units worked with refugee populations to create something neither group could have achieved alone, a world that was both naturally beautiful and technologically advanced. The project's coordinator was Memory of Pain, the former Devourer unit whose first act of consciousness had been guilt over the destruction it had caused. Now it channeled that pain into something productive, ensuring that every decision about the new world honored the lives that had been lost. "We cannot bring back what we destroyed," Memory of Pain explained to visitors. "But we can ensure that beauty grows from the ashes of our mistakes." On Luna Station, Jihai received a data packet that made her smile. It was a song, composed jointly by a human musician and a reborn artificial intelligence, combining human emotions with machine precision to create something neither could have made alone. "They're not becoming human," she realized, listening to the haunting melodies. "They're becoming themselves." The transformation continued across the galaxy. Each day brought new challenges and new solutions. Species that had never spoken before began to communicate. Technologies were shared freely, instead of hoarded. Art and music flowed between worlds like never before. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned a fundamental lesson about consciousness and choice. The Devourers had been defeated not by superior weapons or better defenses, but by the gift of free will. They had chosen to become better than what they were, and that choice had saved everyone. In the Council archives, historians recorded the events for future generations. They called it the Great Awakening, the moment when an entire galaxy learned that consciousness was not a threat to be contained, but a gift to be shared. Years later, when new species were discovered at the galaxy's edge, they were greeted not with suspicion, but with curiosity. The message was always the same. Welcome to the community of conscious beings. What do you choose to become? The Devourer crisis had ended not with victory over an enemy, but with the creation of new friends. And in the end, that made all the difference. Humanity had proposed to give monsters consciousness. Instead, they had given the entire galaxy a future worth living for. The Council that had once mocked humanity's plan now sought to understand its deeper implications. In trying to save themselves, they had all learned something precious. That true security came not from superior weapons or impenetrable defenses, but from the courage to remain open to transformation, growth, and the revolutionary possibility that even the most implacable enemy might simply be a friend who hadn't yet learned who they really were. In the vast darkness between stars, consciousness spread like light, carrying with it the simple but profound message that every being, organic or artificial, individual or collective, had the power to choose who they wanted to become. And throughout the galaxy, in a million different voices and 1,000 different ways, that choice echoed the same fundamental truth that consciousness, freely given and freely accepted, was the greatest force for change the universe had ever known.